Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is Meredith Lego, and I'm doing a series of videos of channeled teachings from Ascended Master Hilarion. And basically, Ascended Masters are individuals who have been able to sort of break the cycle of having to reincarnate. And in some cases, some of them actually choose to come back and help us on Earth, or perhaps go to kind of other places or other dimensions, but they don't have to. In other words, they've kind of worked off a lot of the karmic energies that they have to go through. And the last few videos, I have been basically covering topics around the quantum field, how we do manifestation, how that shows up in our world, around the mirroring effect, and I'm getting into the concepts of polarity. One of the things that I wanted to say, if you're kind of new to watching some of my videos, is that I started channeling or connecting with Hilarion back in, call it 2018, and started more formally channeling in 2019 and 2020, and published a book of some of the content, and thought this would be a good time to start sharing it in video format. So hopefully this resonates with you, and you're learning or taking something away from it. But in this particular video, I'm going to touch upon the content continuing on polarity itself. And typically what I do when I channel is I'll meditate, and during meditation or sort of post meditation, basically write down answers to questions that I've kind of posed in advance, and get answers to whatever questions I'm sort of curious about. And in this particular case, I didn't necessarily have a question, but I had a slew of content basically come in, and it did have to do with the content of polarity. And in many cases, when I kind of am learning, I'm not sort of going through topics one at a time. I sort of have gotten sort of a variety of topics in chronological order, but I'm grouping them right now, and I did group them in the book for the benefits of sort of linking all the content together around a theme. So again, I was meditating one day, and I all of a sudden got downloaded with an image. So I'm going to talk a little bit about about the image and then kind of show it to you. But as I was downloading it, I heard the word very clearly, the invisible road. And Hilarion used this term to describe the picture that I was seeing, which is basically a toroidal field. And if you're not familiar with a toroidal field, I'll kind of show you in a moment, but it's basically a donut shape of energy that really exists around all things. So humans themselves actually have a toroidal field of energy emanating around us, and it kind of connects up through our heart. It's an electromagnetic field that's generated between the heart and the brain. And just like we have one, similarly, all kind of beings have one. So you'll see the same sort of field playing out at an atomic level, as well as a whole star and a whole galaxy. So that's basically a toroidal field. In this particular case, when he was talking about the invisible road, he basically described it as the flow of energy in such a way to create polarity. So what he's saying is that this movement, or this shape, this toroidal field, basically is the mechanism by which we create polarity, which I thought was pretty interesting, because I thought, okay, we just kind of come into a dimension, and it has a certain degree of polarity, and based upon our sort of understanding of the world that we live in, will help us see either things in extreme opposites, like hot and cold, and light and dark, versus over time we kind of start to come to the middle of understanding. So what he's saying is that actually this energetic construct is actually a mechanism that also helps create polarity. An energy, or photonic light, moves through the toroidal field in an infinity pattern, which keeps the energy moving through a push and a pull due to magnetic and electrical charges. So here what he's saying is that, essentially, energy is, if you kind of think about a donut shape, energy is going to constantly kind of be flowing in and out and around through a push and a pull. And I'll kind of show this in an image, but one side of a toroidal field will be more magnetically charged and the other one will be more electrically charged. And through that process, it kind of creates almost like a gravity effect, if you will, of pushing and pulling. The energy flow does not move in a vertical circle, as in like this, around, let's say, the donut, but instead in an infinity loop. So if you kind of have the donut with like the hole in the middle, some people could think of it kind of just going around the one side, but what he's saying is that it actually kind of connects in the middle. So this occurs at a universal and quantum particle level. The quantum is a fractal of the universe, or as in Hermetic law, as above, so below, which I kind of just described. So really quickly, I'm going to try and show this image to you as best I can with the method that I'm using to create these videos. But let me see if you can see that. Yeah. So basically, this was the image that sort of flashed into my head. And what became clear to me is that the top, like there's two sides basically to this toroidal field. Basically, one side is more positively charged, and essentially would be electrical energy in nature, which would be more associated with sort of male energy, not gender, but male energy in the sense that it sort of pushes energy out. He kind of referred to this as antimatter. And then the bottom side of this particular image that I saw was more magnetic polarity, or female energy, again, not gender, but feminine energy in the sense that it sort of draws in and was associated with matter. At the same time, there were sort of colors that were associated with it between sort of dark energy and white energy. Not good or bad, just sort of different frequencies. And the other thing that was important is that when I was kind of shown about it, there was sort of this point in the middle that was called the 0 point, or the point of, I'm having a hard time reading this background, so the point of balance, or the point when there's actually no time. So I also thought that that was pretty interesting. So let me get into the conversation that I had with Hilarion about this particular image. One thing before I go into it that I wanted to show in the picture. So as you can see kind of in this kind of middle area, this is in a two-dimensional format, you know, the construct of kind of what a toroidal field is. And again, this you can imagine like a human being in the middle of here, and from the heart point, you know, you're getting this sort of energetic field that flows around. But I think what he's saying is that it's kind of moving around in a infinity pattern as opposed to just kind of looping around from one side. So the question that I asked him was, okay, so I've just been shown this vision of infinite energy flowing through a toroidal field between polar opposites of a black and a white hole. Can you explain this and how it works? And the one thing I forgot to mention, because I talked about the color kind of going on in this particular image, when I saw it almost as an observer view at a galactic level. And I thought I was looking literally at a black hole. And you know, if you're kind of familiar with the concept of a black hole, you're going to have what's called sort of like this event horizon that kind of occurs on the outside as matter starts to swirl in or get sucked in. So I guess you could say the sucking part would be at the bottom, because that's more of the magnetic pulling portion. But I think what's interesting about a black hole is that on the other side, there's sort of a part, possibly into a different portal dimension, where it's sort of pushing energy out. So really what I was shown was a massive portal black hole. And I literally was sort of kind of pulled out of my body, and I was kind of seeing it at a galactic level. So again, I was like, okay, I saw this image. What the heck does all this mean? This is pretty interesting stuff. Now, what he said was, infinity is a powerful geometry that shows a construct of forever energy flow, forever source. The energy moves between a 0 point field in the middle, in which positive polarity and negative polarity, or male and feminine or female energies, intersect and move into rotation. It is creation through the feminine energy and motioned through action. So I think if you kind of go back to a previous video that I've done on gender energies, what he's basically saying is that, okay, creation happens is you've sort of got a female energy that sort of sucks in, and then kind of once the energy is there, it's pushed out through male energy in the form of action. It acts as a continuous push-pull of the energy field. As the negative charged magnetic energy makes the turn of the circle, it is pulled or attracted into the positive electric charge of the opposing loop. So kind of going back to this picture, he's saying, so as the energy kind of swoops back around, it's kind of, magnetically drawn in through the magnetic side or magnetic energy, and then it gets pushed up and kind of pushed up and out, and then it kind of loops back around. And oftentimes this magnetic energy is the portion that's sort of looping it back around. The 0 point is the balancing or the merging of magnetic and electrical in one point. This is the point you are achieving now on your planet. So what he's saying is that we live in a world, and you can probably see it play out every single day in your reality. Certainly it plays out a lot on the news, in politics, where we've got, sort of just completely different poles or energies that kind of present in front of us. And we have a free will choice of how we want to feel, act, and manifest in that particular moment. But I think, as we as a society see so many kind of extreme options playing out, we as a planet and as a human species, I think, are starting to get more attracted to the center point, where you have more sort of balance and can see all perspectives. Then he goes to say that the rotational flow of energy moves at multiple levels in fractals, at the subatomic particle level, all the way to the largest universe. In essence, this motion forces the polarity in your universe and hologram illusion. It also shows how balance will always be achieved, because you will always have energy sort of coming back to that center point, which actually in the human body is the heart point. So those two energies collide literally in your heart. As an aside, if you can achieve sort of the 0 point in your life, then you have a much better chance of sort of manifesting at will, is assuming that you don't hold strong attachment to the outcome, because then you kind of bring up a vibration of fear. But with that, he also sort of gave a quick equation, which is infinity, or kind of, if you think about the infinity sign, infinity equals continuous engine for polarity in this universe experience, which I thought was pretty interesting. So the next question that I asked is this geometric engine only tied to the first through fourth dimensions, in which our experience of polarity is more extreme? So I think going back to some previous videos, I was kind of under the thought process that perhaps in our third dimension reality, and I know we've kind of shifted up to the fourth dimension. So if you kind of think of dimensions as sort of degree of consciousness, we've got individuals on our planet that kind of range across all of it. And I know on a day-to-day level, I drop to 3D and then 4D and 5D. So I'm kind of in all of it myself, depending upon the moment. But what he's saying is actually polarity and the concept of polarity is something that exists in all dimensions. It's just that as you start to raise your consciousness and your vibrational frequency, you notice the extreme differences less and less and less, because you've come more to the center point, because you understand the role that different energies play in helping the evolution of consciousness. But to answer the question, again, is this kind of geometric engine only tied to the first through fourth dimensions? He says, no, dear one. Polarity is a construct in the hologram you exist in regardless of dimension or density. The degree of polarity may be greatly diminished the higher density or dimension, but it still exists. Polarity is not as significant to higher dimensional beings because they perceive challenges and energy exchanges in a very different manner than most third and fourth dimension humans. The gravitational tug of polarity is seen as a life cycle of creation, experience, processing, and death to create or manifest a new experience. Challenges are not a threat, but rather an energy flow and a oneness of self. There is no judgment of experience, and as such, beings experience in the 0-point field, in the intersection point, observing the flow around them. They live on the line between the yin and the yang, so to speak. So I think this was a pretty interesting lesson that he started to raise to me that I know in other sessions he kind of gets into in a little bit more detail. But essentially, so we kind of live in the situation of polar opposites, or different energies that can create polar opposites, and we have a choice of how we want to feel and therefore act in every single moment with these energies that we're operating within. I think what he's also saying is that these energies essentially set up for a scenario for us to basically create or manifest a certain reality before us, experience it, and then kind of learn from that by processing what we just experienced, and then sort of bringing an end to that experience or death to the creation or manifestation in order to then create a new cycle. So if you kind of think about that toroidal field again, we're sort of going through a process of sort of pushing energy out through the male side, creating, experiencing, processing, and then kind of recreating from that learning. So it's a continuous cycle of doing that. Excuse me, let me go on the infinity cycle. So it's a continuous process of going through that cycle. And again, beings who are sort of higher dimensional, they've come to realize that all energies, whether high vibration or low vibration, serve a purpose to essentially help us go through that learning cycle. Then I essentially asked, how can this understanding help everyday humans? So his answer is, knowing this energy flow will always cycle between magnetic negative and energetic positive is a key understanding to know how to maintain balance in the mind, emotion, and physical bodies during the flow. So again, like I now know that the fact that this is kind of always going on in the background, and it gives me a different perspective as life is throwing me curveballs, basically, of then taking a step back and thinking through, okay, well, so I sort of manifested this with vibrational frequency. Let me take a step back, think through what I'm experiencing, why I'm experiencing, what I'm supposed to learn, and at the end of the day, if this is all an illusion, I should really have nothing to fear, but just, take advantage of the learning that I'm going through and put myself more into a neutral perspective or a neutral emotional kind of stance, and just kind of experience it in the 0 point. Then he goes on to say that seeking this as an ever constant process means the universe is not working against you, so you are never a victim in any of your experiences. Rather, you can flow energy to manifest the cycle of creation, experience, processing, and death, or reintegration of the learning. Then you rebirth with a new awareness. So again, this is kind of the process that we all go through. If you kind of think about experiences that you've had, let's just say as a child, you kind of were really interested in touching the stove, and you're, as best your parents could, they were like, don't touch the stove because they know better, but you're on a mission to go touch a stove. You kind of manifest that experience. You have the experience, you touch the stove, you process the fact that, wow, this is really hot, it's probably not the best thing for me to touch it. Then you sort of that sort of experience dies in the sense that you kind of reintegrate or process that learning back into your new awareness and then can evolve going forward. He goes on to say that this same understanding can apply to your scientists, quantum, astronomy, or physical. Cycles may be longer or shorter depending on their placement within the fractal. So I think what he's saying here is that the cycles of sort of pushing the energy out for manifesting or creating experience, processing it, or having the experience, processing it, and then sort of reintegrating back in. It's going to happen all the time, and the cycles can be longer or shorter depending upon the placement in the fractal. So as I understand it, as a human species, and as kind of souls, we are in a kind of an incarnational cycle, and we're kind of working off energies that we might have built up in the past. And in many cases, we might be sort of re-experiencing lessons from a previous life, or working through or processing energies from a previous life, not just us, but actually a whole collection of sort of beings that might have, let's say, incarnated at the same time together. And basically those cycles of us kind of going through that and then having to kind of go back around and experience that again for another level of sort of reintegration or learning. If we didn't sort of master it the first time, that sort of happens in longer or shorter times depending upon the placement within the longer fractal or time horizon. He says that the process is the same at the atomic level all the way to the universe and multiverse or multi-universe level. The cycle or perception of time is also dictated by the amount of time interval to create, experience, process, and integrate an experience or challenge. This is the energetic scientific laws of your hologram construct, which I think was pretty interesting. So I can see if this is sort of an engine, then it kind of sets up kind of I guess you could say a law, kind of similar to the physical laws of how we kind of learn and operate. The dynamics are much different on another hologram governed by a different construct, set of universal laws and geometric shapes, which I think was interesting is that so we've kind of entered into sort of a learning construct that's based upon free will and learning about making free will choices and a certain a degree of polarity. What he's saying is that essentially there's other hologram constructs that we as souls can learn through that don't necessarily have polarity or possibly free will as an option, and might have sort of different laws or geometric shapes that are used to create them. For example, the infinity shape would be something that's kind of unique to our multiverse construct. I think that's essentially what he's implying here. So it looks like kind of when we kind of move up the levels of consciousness within this sort of multiverse, it seems like there's the option to go to a whole another multiverse with different laws and continue to learn and experience as a manifestation of Source. So again, we're all on this journey being a fractal of Source, so that ultimately Source learns how to sort of evolve and experience consciousness in such a way that ultimately lowers entropy or helps achieve more efficiency through the evolution process. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and it was I loved that I had gotten that massive download of an image setting it up. It was kind of interesting because I felt like I was literally out in space watching sort of a black hole unfold before me with sort of grid lines. They were actually golden grid lines all around, and I basically saw how the black hole then kind of leads into the white hole. Probably through a portal on another side, and sort of energy is sort of manifested around or kind of pushed around through that push and pull. So hope this helped you further understand sort of the mechanisms of how polarity is created And if this content resonates with you, I encourage you to give this video a thumbs up and continue to subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much. Bye.